McLaren face a mammoth task in 2024 if they plan on securing a first constructors title since 1998. But in 2023, they showed they can find a way. Red Bull's monstrous lead can be overhauled, and Zak Brown has made a huge claim as to how. In Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, he has two of the best drivers on the grid, who showed last season that given the right machinery, they can compete with the best. Today, I'm going to take a look at what Zak Brown has said about McLaren's hopes for 2024 and what he should expect from his drivers. Let's get started. McLaren pulled off a spectacular comeback in 2023 to recover from last to fourth in the Constructors' Championship. In the second half of the season, they were the second highest scoring team on the grid, and Lando Norris led the charge with 5 podiums in 10 races, the best return of anyone but Max Verstappen. McLaren racing boss Zak Brown believes Formula 1 is edging closer to the incredibly competitive racing of IndyCar. For years, IndyCar has relied on a spec Dallara chassis and only 2 engine manufacturers, meaning all teams use the same or very similar equipment and hardware. But the emphasis on parity extends beyond chassis and engines to other components, such as tires and aero kits. This equality in equipment levels the playing field, making it more about driver skill and team strategy, and has fostered incredibly competitive racing. In 2023, F1 also witnessed a narrowing of the performance gap between teams, thanks in large part to the sport's budget cap and to restrictive aero rules. This trend has led to some thrilling qualifying sessions, with a field often separated by mere tenths of a second. Nonetheless, Max Verstappen still dominated the sport thanks to his sensational season-long performance. Brown, who heads teams in Formula 1 and IndyCar, says that F1 is not far from achieving an IndyCar level of parity, as the current technical regulations persist into 2024 and 2025. If you look at the timesheets, even these teams that are 9th and 10th are a threat for Q3, Brown said. For the championship, it's probably going to be the same cast of characters, but I think Formula 1 is going to get more competitive. I think it's going to be more like IndyCar, where there's a lot of drivers that can win at any one time, and rarely someone runs away with the championship. Formula 1 and IndyCar are two very different championships. Part of Formula 1 is always going to be the ability of the team to create the best possible car, not just the driver's own driving ability. And that is what a lot of people love about Formula 1 as well. It's more than just one race. It's the hard work and ingenuity of an entire team over the course of years. What we do love though is close racing, and Formula 1 is providing that at the moment. But with close racing comes big challenges, as Zak Brown explained recently when discussing McLaren's aims for 2024. As we work around the clock on our 2024 Challenger, we intend to build on this year's progress and push our rivals even harder next year. All teams are locked in a quest for car development and greater pace. That is just as fierce off the track as it is on it. But our team will rise to the challenge with its usual determination and relentless dedication. Mercedes, Ferrari, and Aston Martin didn't make it easy for us, but we pushed at every race on each and every lap, resulting in a thrilling finish where the final positions in the FIA Formula 1 Constructors' World Championship were only decided at the 22nd and last round of the season. Never before have 5 different teams scored 7 podiums in the same season, which just goes to underscore the competitive nature of the grid this year. Despite Max Verstappen winning 19 of the season's races, 2023 was an incredibly competitive season, and with the regulations staying the same for 2024, we should expect even closer racing next year. While for newer fans of the sport, McLaren might seem like an unlikely underdog fighting their way into the upper echelons of the F1 hierarchy. They are a historically incredibly successful team, just not so much in the past 2 decades. Since they were founded by Bruce McLaren back in 1966, they've won 8 constructors' titles and 12 drivers' titles. This is a big team, and in 2023, with their incredible turnaround mid-season, they showed that they should be the favourites to challenge Red Bull. While Ferrari and Mercedes got their car concepts all wrong and floundered about for most of the season, with ineffectual upgrades and grandiose statements about improving, McLaren made a massive impact on their performance, with decisive and effective changes to their car and concept. With the regulations staying the same for 2024, Zak Brown is confident in his team's ability to close the gap to Red Bull, especially with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris behind the wheel. Before the 2023 season, Lando Norris was already regarded as an exceptional talent who was just waiting for the right car so he could really fight for podiums. And in the second half of 2023, McLaren provided that. Oscar Piastri, though, was an unknown quantity after McLaren made a dramatic move for him in the off-season, paying Daniel Ricciardo millions of dollars to leave the team to make space for Oscar. Expectations were pretty high, but Piastri definitely surpassed them. Piastri delivered one of the most impressive debut seasons in recent years, taking 2 podiums and a pole to flag win in Qatar's sprint, as his McLaren team found form after the summer break. While still some way off the race performances of his more experienced teammate Lando Norris, who grabbed 6 podiums and scored over twice the number of points. The unflappable young Australian impressed with his maturity in his first year in F1. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella singled out Oscar Piastri's podium in Japan as the moment the team knew they had a truly incredible driver at their disposal. On a track like Suzuka, he put it in P2 on the grid. We really need to reflect for a second on the extent of this result, Stella pointed out. A track like Suzuka, not only is it high speed, but it's a very narrow track. It's a very unforgiving track as soon as you go too wide because you have the gravel in some places. In terms of speed, in terms of capacity to learn very rapidly, in terms of collaborating with his engineers and extracting the information that he needs to grow so rapidly, in terms of his own awareness of where he is in the various stages to go from. I know nothing about this track, first time in an F1 car, to being P2 on the grid. Having a young and exciting driver like Oscar is always great, alongside the more experienced and also exceptionally skilled Lando Norris. Oscar has found himself at the perfect team to grow and hone his skills, but having 2 incredible drivers on the same team rarely works out. Recent examples of troubled team environments with 2 amazing drivers could be Hamilton and Rosberg or Verstappen and Ricciardo. For F1 drivers, beating their teammates is everything, and when you have 2 incredibly skilled and competitive drivers, that can cause problems. Despite a one-off clash in the Italian Grand Prix, Norris and Piastri enjoyed a harmonious relationship in 2023, with Norris the de facto team leader in his 5th year with the Woking squad, while Piastri came in as a rookie. The scoreline reflected their different experience levels, with Norris scoring over double the number of points of the Australian, as well as 7 podiums compared to 2. But Piastri did score a win in Qatar's sprint, something Norris has not yet managed. As Piastri develops over the off-season, he'll start closing that gap to Lando, and in 2024, we could see the 2 really starting to battle out on track, something that McLaren are very worried about. There is nothing worse for a team than seeing their 2 drivers come together and end their races in a crash, like how Gasly and Ocon did in Australia last season. With Norris and Piastri often closely matched on raw speed already, Zak Brown says the team is prepared for the pair to look after their own interests, but says he and Andrea Stella will get ahead of any tensions. Not a concern. There's an awareness that anytime you have 2 drivers, that one is going to have to beat the other at some weekends, Brown said in response to a question about the 2 clashing in the future. They're super competitive right now. You feel a real energy around them driving for the team. We know there will be a day, probably sooner rather than later, when they're looking after their own interests. I feel Andreas and my strengths are around driver management, so I think we can get ahead of that and manage it to make sure it stays a healthy competitiveness. With 2 drivers of Piastri and Norris's caliber, McLaren are going to have their work cut out to keep the team environment a happy and productive one. As the team strive for a first title since Hamilton's Drivers' Championship in 2008, the last thing they need is 2 drivers working against each other, not with each other. Do you think they are right to be worried about potential clashes? And can they get ahead of any problems between the 2 of them? Do you agree with Zak that 2024 could be an incredibly close year for Formula 1? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you haven't already seen it, then check out our 3-hour video on the complete history of Formula 1. Until next time, drive safe and bye for now.